So I'm quite different to everybody that's been on stage so far. So I know it's nearly lunch, but stick with me because it's not too heavy and hopefully it's visually quite enjoyable. So I'm not a cartographer or a geographer. I have an A-level in geography. I got it in 1986, I got a C, but I haven't done anything since then. So when somebody told me something about rasterizing, I thought it was converting to Rastafarianism. So, you know, I am low level in terms of the technology, but this project was about partnerships with people that did have the technological expertise and particularly Ordnance Survey. So I'm assuming not all of you are based in Southampton, you're based across the world, perhaps the country. So we are a small gallery in the middle of Southampton. It used to be a department store, so these windows here are the shop front of a department store, and it's now the gallery window. And we're right next to the Guildhalls. We're in a very central location, and we're part of the Cultural Quarter. We're funded by Solent University, but we're a very small team. There's just 2 of us. So I know there's been lots of big organisations up here. We're a very small part of an organisation. But my research and one of the focuses we're looking at is how art can be a catalyst for positive social change. And we often talk about bigger issues and use it as a way to discuss wider issues that affect people on a daily basis. So we're trying to increase access to the arts, and we have won a few awards for it, which is nice. Let me just see if I can... Oh, there we go. So the Make Your Mark exhibition, this alternative mapping, it was an exhibition that happened at the beginning of this year. And essentially it was a huge walk-through map that we created on the gallery floor. It was interactive because people could write on it. And it was also an artist commission. So although it was a map, it also was an art piece. And I'll explain a little bit how that happened. But we also saw it as an opportunity to talk about the city of Southampton. So using mapping as a way for people to discuss how they feel about a place. So yeah, the reasons for this project is Southampton's actually going to bid for City of Culture 2025, and there's a lot of work that has to go into that. There's been quite a lot of discussions about what culture is. Now, culture isn't just art or theatre or music, it's actually sport, it's storytelling. It's your leisure time, it's experiences and activities that people do with their families, and it's about space. So we wondered about, you know, is culture inclusive? You know, what do people feel about the city and its cultural provision? What is the city about? And there's actually quite a lot of conversations in Southampton where people don't really know. They might like living here, but they can't say, oh, we love the particular, you know, the shopping or the food. People like various things about Southampton. It's often a bit of a transport hub. People go in and out to shop. They go in and out to go cruising. So we have a lot of people coming and going, but it's not got a very clear identity yet, unlike other cities, maybe Bristol or Bath, which are kind of more obvious sort of cultural providers. So we were trying to find out, how do we have a conversation with the city of Southampton, especially non-arts audiences? How are we going to actually ask them what they think about their city and contribute to that discussion about City of Culture? Because unless you get that together, you can't really win City of Culture. You have to know what you're about and what you're trying to achieve. So as the gallery's got this amazing shop window, we wanted to have a really strong aesthetic principle engaged in this project. So we wanted to have a visual spectacle that people can see from the outside. And there's this thing about the kind of complex layers of a city, which involves sort of histories, myths, and that kind of, you know, everybody's experience of an urban landscape can be very different. So we were hoping to try and engage with a non-arts audience. You know, and so we thought about the idea of maps. So although I'm not a geographer, I love maps, I always have. And actually there's a lot of artists in the city who make maps and map the city in very different ways. So I'm sure you know all about psychogeography, where psychology and geography intersect, and the kind of concept of walking through a city and seeing it with new eyes and expressing how that happens. You know, artists have an ability to transcend politics and policies, and they can have a freedom of opinion of certain things. And I think they've often used maps in really interesting ways to look at the way in which our world has been edited or erased or changed or commented on. And I think that's quite a useful way to do that. We were kind of, where am I? So we were hoping that we could make a map that people would then contribute to and tell us their stories. So essentially an artist is making this map, but then actually the people that come in and tell us the stories are making the exhibition. So curatorially, that's quite frightening. A curator would normally like to have everything pinned down before the show goes up. This is the exhibition, this is what it's about, and explain everything. This is a very open project where we were saying, what do you think? Tell us your stories. And then whatever that would be, that would evolve over the 3 months, and we'd have a set of information and data and stories from people, and that would make the show. So, part of it was about reclaiming the city. Southampton's known as a shopping destination, as I said, and a cruise destination, to go off to other places. But it was about reclaiming it. How important is it to people? Do people care about living here? Are they interested in the history? What makes people tick? And it's quite hard to ask those questions because they're quite vague and quite hard to put the finger on what exactly people think. So this isn't a project that hasn't ever been done before, so we use lots of visual inspiration. The picture on the left is a French artist who does large-scale mapping over walls and galleries. The one in the middle is from Brighton. They did a project called Maps and Lives, and they invited people to bring in artefacts that were important. And the one on the right is called Mapping the Hood, which I really wanted to call the show Mapping the Hood, but Southampton isn't really like a hood. Do you know what I mean? It's not really that kind of place. But that was an American project that brought in lots of areas of social deprivation and asked them to say what was important to them about changing their communities. So that was our kind of basis for inspiration. And I think the key point of this was it was about collaboration. We're a very small team. So it was a 3-way collaboration, and actually Ordnance Survey were the key to that, as was the artist Nathan Evans. So Nathan Evans was a local artist, and he is a graphic designer, specialises in use of colour in very interesting ways. And we've been very proud of the fact that Ordnance Survey is based here. Their home is in Southampton, but obviously they're a national agency. And so I sent out a speculative email to see if they might be able to help us, because that's the person, was it Helen, that was saying about can you just do that request? This is a little bit like one of those, but done with a lot of respect, I hope, because we were saying, can you please help us get an accurate map of Southampton down on the floor, because we don't know how to do it, and we're really hoping that you might be able to help. And I think it was Paul that was talking about the fact that Ordnance Survey has a really good reputation. It might be a small part of their revenue, but their reputation for engaging people, getting people interested in maps, and working with the public. We're a kind of small sector of that, I think, because they got back to us, and Paul Naylor was our main contact, and it started sort of conversations about what we were trying to do and what we wanted to achieve. So we had many kind of meetings about how do we do this? How do you get a map down? Do you print it out and then lay it down on the floor and then somehow copy it? Do you freestyle it from a picture? How would you actually relay a map and get it as accurate as possible? But how do you do it in a way that people can, when they're walking over it, they're going to understand it, and find the places that they like, and then engage with it and have room to write on it directly? So that it hurt my head quite a lot for quite a long time, because I'm not a mathematician either. And so it was a kind of delicate balance of trying to get something that was really effective to communicate, but also accurate. So we were heavily reliant on the expertise of Ordnance Survey, and it's just something we couldn't have done without them. And obviously the artist is transforming mapping information into something that is a creative piece, but also functional. So we tasked them with quite a difficult job, really. And the key thing about Southampton, this is one of the maps that we had from Ordnance Survey, is obviously is the water, and there's this river running through it. So we used that as the main point for people to understand on the floor, that they could see this river running through it. And we managed to fit in a reasonable amount of the city, although we ended up with complaints because we didn't fit everybody in, but there's only so much you can do. And so, you know, we looked at what kind of information we put on, how much detail do we want, because obviously Ordnance Survey can go on to a huge level of detail. You know, what kind of things did we need to have on there? So that was an interesting debate about what we left on and what we left off. So these are quick videos. I told you it was kind of fun and not too heavy. Hope nobody's thinking about sandwiches too much yet. Which just shows you we had to remove all the walls of the gallery, and then we had to lay it with MDF. So it's a bit like kind of getting carpet fitters in. We had to kind of cut all the MDF out and around all the pillars, lay it down, work out how to stick it down, and just make that floor completely flat and as perfect as we could in order to start painting over the top. But hopefully that gives you a sense of the kind of size and scale of it, because although we're not a massive gallery, I don't know if we're like sort of 15, 20 metres long, something like that, it's quite a big undertaking to turn it into something else. So it's a very different kind of space. And then, sorry, how do I play that? Yeah, it was done with a GoPro hung from the ceiling, so it's... so then we painted it white, and then we had to paint it orange. Obviously had a bit of fun along the way, because we made our own marks in our own way. So we painted that orange. You can see it getting dark at night. These guys were working a lot doing this. But Nathan basically chose the colour orange as the base, which is not the usual mapping colour, I know. But he felt like it was a really good starting point of a colour to begin with, and hopefully it would still be understandable. So this is the projection of the first map. So what Ordnance Survey did for us was produced us about 12 maps that were kind of divided up, and they cut the city up into sections, and then we projected them across the floor of the gallery, and we literally drew it. So it was kind of like fancy tracing, I suppose. And that's just an example of one thing that we did. And I think that took probably about a week to actually do that as well, just to do each one and fill the whole space. And then once we'd done that, that's when the painting could begin. So Nathan used different colours to kind of, so they were kind of linked to maps. So obviously the river was quite a deep kind of navy blue. The common was sort of an aquamarine. Some of the roads were yellow, some of them were pink, but it was still understandable, and people could still work it out, and it still made sense. We used lots of different tools, paintbrushes, rollers, all sorts of things. It was a bit of an epic achievement, really. And I think this one is just showing you the river. So it snakes through the kind of along the floor of the gallery from one entrance to the other. And this is just a nice overview of the whole thing from start to finish, which is very quick. There was a lot of mess. So I'm glad we didn't write anything rude, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to show that, which is lucky for me. And you can see the shop window there, and lots of people were looking and stopping, so it created a bit of a spectacle just even installing it. So that was the common area, because we kind of felt like the common in Southampton is quite a key part, and Southampton's got quite a lot of parks, and we wanted to make sure that was represented. There's our yellow roads going down, pink roads, and then you kind of start to get a sense of what the actual size looks like, and hopefully you can get a sense of the scale of the work that went on as well. There's a football stadium, obviously very important to people who live in Southampton. And then that was the gathering, the private view, and that's basically literally people starting to tromp all over it. The first day they did that, it's like, no, the beautiful map. And we ended up having to varnish it because it started to chip and sort of degrade. But that gives you a sense of the whole thing. And then here is Nathan with his finished work, feeling very relieved. I think the next picture, which I didn't put in, is of him lying flat on the floor, because it was a tiring sort of effort. But I think it worked really well visually. I hope we haven't upset anybody with our colours. But I think you can hopefully agree that it's still understandable. The river's still the river, the green spaces are still the green spaces. But it's obviously, for me, it's become a really lovely artwork and you can see the common there. And so what we really had to do at this point was just let people loose on it. And so that's what we did, and that's where we gathered as much data as possible, which was to kind of invite people in, show them how to kind of use the exhibition and make them feel as welcome as possible. Because the point is, it wasn't about this is a good pub, that's a good restaurant, I like it here. It was about what did you do in this space, what happened here, what does this place mean to you? So we did get people saying, I was born here, this happened, but actually what we started to get was really interesting stories from all sorts of different ranges of people. So we found that young people loved it. You just saw that picture of that little kid, that's Roshu. He used to run like mad up and down over that map and bring in his little toys, little kind of road trucks and things, and just drive them along the road. While we were thinking, God, it's going to chip the paint, it's going to chip the paint. But lots of kids came in and did that. I don't know if anyone remembers having those maps, like rugs. They used to do things, yeah. So it was like a massive version of that. And you could slide on it. So kids took their shoes off and just did a whole slide across the gallery. But you don't get to do that in galleries. That's the thing. You go to galleries, they're often very revered spaces. You have to be quiet. This was not a kind of quiet and revered space. This was more fun for young people. But we also got elderly people in their 80s coming in and writing stories about the war and sort of unexploded bombs and different things that happened, and lots of things that people didn't know. So lots of archive people from the library were really interested to see what people had written about some of the spaces that they didn't know about. We had lots of people telling us their secrets, which was really interesting. They'd kind of sneak in and just write and then run away again. And then you'd go and you see what they wrote and you'd be like, oh my gosh. And some of it was quite shocking, and some of it we had to paint out, I have to say. It was not appropriate at all, and very naughty. But there were other things which were quite sad, actually, and really deeply moving, and really beautiful that they felt able to share it in that space and safe enough to do so. I think one person wrote that they came out to their parents and told them that they were gay in Asda. And that's such a mundane place and such a monumental thing to be telling your mum at the cash out of Asda, I'm gay, mum, whilst you're packing your baked beans in the bag. So it was that curious thing about urban city living and then monumental things happening at the same time. It was quite an extraordinary kind of revelation. Somebody came and told us about a bit of black history, where in Southampton there's lots of stone pineapples dotted around the city, which is symbolic of a trade with pineapples and the Caribbean countries that had them. And pineapple is symbolic of welcome in Jamaica and other countries. And so in Victorian times they were built and put on some of the buildings that traded in pineapples with Jamaica and the Caribbean. And they're dotted about the city, and I didn't know about that. Loads of people didn't. And someone came in and told us where they were. So it was an interesting bit of black history that was sort of uncovered. And we had not just art students coming in, we had geography students coming in. So I was quite pleased about that. Hopefully that will be an interesting kind of way in which people related to the map as well. And like I said, lots of local artists also mapping it. So there's lots of ways that people map things that are provide information, but in a very different way. They're subjective, they're unreliable sometimes, but they can also be really informative. And a lot of those people came out of the woodwork. So I'm just sharing a few of the stories that we had on there. So this is all kind of the parks and the common, because we found really that people loved the parks, they loved the common, and they loved the water. And so many experiences happened here. So the top left, I hope it's not blurred, because some of them were taken on a phone. But World War II, German prisoners of war, they live on the common and they go home for Christmas dinner with local families. Love blossoms. I don't know if that means that this is somebody that's met one of those soldiers and has fallen in love and got married, but there's a kind of interesting story there. There used to be a balloon festival, and people would write, I miss the balloon festival, and then somebody else would write, so do I. And it was there was conversations that would happen on the common. People would talk about the nature, the crows that would flock there. Somebody's telling a funny story about his granddad sunk his boat and being rescued. There's a very sad story. I had a miscarriage here, but then someone wrote, you are strong, so they were responding to it. And over time, that more people wrote around that, and words of support and kindness, which was a lovely thing to see. And then somebody wrote, don't think I would have survived without this beautiful big space to run around. That's the main Southampton Common. And I think that really shows that place and space is very much linked with health and well-being and activity, and in a way that tells that story quite well. In a way sometimes it's hard to get across to people quite how important these spaces are. So some sort of mad, chaotic writing of all sorts of different things. It started to get quite chaotic towards the end. Lots of people layering different things about skate parks and I don't know, some interesting things going on. You Are Here is where our gallery was. Somebody down on the bottom left there was born in this house in 1936, so we had somebody in their 80s telling us about their lives. People would write on events, so this youth climate march was happening. People would write on things that were going on, particularly related to climate change. Lots of people drew lots of boats. People had lots of arguments about matches and how good Southampton were. And someone wrote, Southampton Football Club's rubbish. No, it's not, it's brilliant. We won this. And there was this whole argument that went around this whole stadium. Another person wrote, first queer date at Odeon Cinema to watch something university, Monsters University. So it's kind of, again, like that kind of trivial but really significant thing. And look, somebody has written original ordnance survey base in Southampton. I reckon that was Paul or somebody else. But there was a lot of those things, like people missing buildings and things that had gone. So you can't see them anymore. They're not on any maps, particularly apart from historical maps, but they're still really part of people's lives and they still affect how people feel about the space. Some really intriguing stories. And for some of the schools that weren't on the map, we went out to those schools and we asked them questions about where they lived and their trips to school and asked them to draw their maps about what their experiences of going to school and back were like. And then, and then we put that up in the gallery as well. So it was a different way of kind of mapping their experiences. We had geography students that came in and, like I said, talked about culture. And we were asking people about Southampton, what they thought about it culturally, whether they thought it was a place that was welcoming. So we were doing a lot of kind of gathering of information and data for the City of Culture bid, and we're still gathering that, but we're hoping to kind of publish it and kind of give that out to people from the Cultural Development Trust to help inform that process. We had dancers in the space. It was kind of used as a hub space for discussion. So it was very kind of multi-layered arts, cultural experiences, but not just drawing on the floor, but lots of different types of interactions. And then I think when we finished the exhibition, the map was taken off the floor and then distributed across the city. So people in shops in Portswood wanted the Portswood map. I think Ordnance Survey have some of it, of the Common, I think, which we prepared for them. And, it got distributed around different people who wanted to keep it. And, that was also a nice outcome. So that's just the whole map photographed with GoPro from the ceiling, just the whole thing, which is slightly condensed. But it gives you a sense of all the amount of scribbling that went on. And as you can see, I've put thank you and I've put lunchtime, because that's probably what it is now. Thank you very much for listening.
One pressing question, if anyone has one. Yes, please.
So did you photograph the panels in reasonably high resolution before you finished, so that they need to be gone on a web map and
yes.
have a legacy?
That's what I would like to do, is to find a way to actually collate all of that information. It's all being photographed with high res and collate it in some way so that we might be able to then make a map of the map in some way. But again, we're quite a small organisation, haven't got a lot of funding, so it's there, and we can, we're kind of interested to see if we can link with people to work out how we might do that. But yeah, it would be nice, I think.
Might be able to help.
Oh, good, fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, please do take the chance to speak to Kate in lunch or on a break if you get a chance. Can I ask you to just thank all the speakers from this session, please?